Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Value Added, the real estate podcast. On today's episode, we're chatting with Mason Moreland. Mason is an environmental consultant. He is also the managing partner of West Texas-based Texas Vine Country. Texas Vine Country is a wine and beverage-centric investment business. They focus primarily on the syndication, development, and operation of wine grape vineyards in the Texas High Plains part of Texas. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Value Added, the real estate podcast where we speak with the brightest minds in the world of real estate who provide, create, and realize value in an ever-changing market. And now your host, Nick Walters.
Hey, what's going on, Nick?
Man, if that's your real setting, that's beautiful vine country out there.
I wish it was where I was at now. I'm sitting in my metal building shop office, but yeah, this is the vineyard behind me. I don't know that there's anything but the barn out there that's as high up positioned as I am. I think Rusty was up on one of the really big tractors when he took this photo.
Nice. How have you been, man? It's been a few months since we chatted. Fill us in. How's life out there in West Texas?
It's good, man. I've got a third daughter now since we talked, and man, life's good. I'm drowning in a sea of estrogen though, so there's that. But
I don't have I have a newborn as well. We have our second boy, and he's 5, going on 6 months old.
Congratulations! That's fantastic, man.
Thanks.
It's always interesting. Go ahead.
It is interesting. Life is does not have a dull moment, right?
No, not at all.
So let's dig in. Tell the listeners a little bit about your career and what you've been doing up to this point, and then we're obviously going to dig into to your new Texas Vine Country your venture. Fill us in.
Yeah, sure. So my background is weird for real estate or anything like that. I'm a biologist by training, specialized in herpetology, so all the nasty, squishy, scaly critters that nobody else likes. But you know what? Somebody's got to do the job. And thought for a long time I was going to go into academia on that front, and decided chasing government grants was not for me, and decided to go into consulting. It's a lot more applied. So I've been in environmental consulting for a little over 7 years, almost 8 years now, pretty much right out of school. And been working for oil and gas companies, worked in oil and gas as environmental compliance, and actually started my real estate journey kind of right out of school. So around 2012, 2013, bought my first house. And, my dad approached me and was like, hey, I've been talking to your brother, and, it's rare that we have, that people have 3 intelligent people that have a varied skill set that really get along really well and have the same kind of business mind to them. Let's do something in real estate. Let's buy a bunch of single family homes, rent them out, go from there. So we started doing that. We got up to where we are now, about 15 or 16 doors across Texas down here in several of the different cities and DFW, Lubbock, Midland, and decided, hey, this is not scalable at all, right? We can't provide the level of quality as easily as we want to our tenants that, we greatly improve their quality of life, the value of every dollar we're spending, right? So let's get into multifamily. We can get a lot of synergies there. Went through that and tried to buy our first multifamily property solo, and it was really hard, and we failed, so to speak. I guess we got all the way up through physical due diligence, and from my background in rehabbing and things like that, I was like, guys, we're going to dose this place. This is bad. We can't provide these. We can make money and just leave it the way it is, but the quality of life that these tenants have is nowhere near what we would, with our values, feel comfortable with, right? We were like, we either have to put another $1 million into this and dose it and build a new one, or do significant rehab, or live with making money off people living like that. We weren't okay with that. So that was kind of disheartening. This is around the time I had my first daughter. And as you probably know, a lot of times, especially if they're not good eaters, you spend a lot of time just like trying to stay awake and feed the baby and not fall asleep, right? So we spent a lot of time doing that in bed, just sitting there trying to feed the baby. And so we were binging on Netflix. This was back when we still did TV and Netflix. I've kind of cut that out because you could probably tell I have a lot going on now. But I think we watched, it was a great year. I want to say it was Russell Crowe, but it wasn't even that great of a movie. But I remember distinctly thinking, man, these people are just living on a vineyard, and making money doing it. This is a life. I need to do this. I know I have friends that have vineyards. It's not as pretty, but I should look into this. And that's kind of what led me down this path that I veered off onto now in real estate, which is
so that was your moment. That was your aha moment. Just a side note, your discovery of the vineyard game is very similar to how I got involved in investing in car washes. I was binge watching Breaking Bad, and if you know that that series, then you know exactly what I wasn't interested in laundering dirty money, but I was, I'm always looking for investment opportunities, and the rest was history. But anyway, so let's go into your aha moment. You're binge watching something with Russell Crowe, and then you a light bulb goes off, and you're like, hey, I'm going to I'm going to investigate the vineyard industry down here in Texas. So tell us a little bit about that epiphany.
Yeah. So, it was one of those things where at that point I'd underwritten, and kind of my main skill that I developed in the real estate world was underwriting complex deals and things like that. I'd underwritten, hundreds of homes at this point, tons of apartment complexes, weird businesses, coin operated laundries. Like I can do this, just build a model, right? Start with a blank spreadsheet, and I'll come up with a little ecosystem for this vineyard thing to live in. And I may be a biologist, but I don't know everything about how vineyards work. So, I had to go search out those friends that had that experience. And, I ended up gaining a whole lot of connections here in the industry that folks that have already built models that I could, have some understanding of the mechanics of it, and people that could walk me through, their seasonality. And right. It's like, you're probably not getting nearly as much car wash revenue during, I don't know if where they're at has a rainy season, but obviously there's some seasonality at play there. But the first thing I did is same thing I do with any deal. I underwrote it, and the first set of numbers I got, I would never invest in that. It was not great. Basically, what I saw was a big money pit where you put in a lot of money to set up a vineyard. You take on, risk just like any other investment. It's a little different, freeze risk, hail risk instead of tenants flooding your property or something. But the overhead was insane. The amount of hand labor that it took to run a vineyard, and you don't get any significant production really until years 4 and 5. It was just too long of a payout. Too low of a cash on cash return for the risk to make sense, right? So I kind of dropped it for a while. It's like, this is not going to work, but it's interesting, and so it made me keep coming back to it and think, there are a lot of other people doing this, right? In California, Washington, Oregon, New York. Some people do it this way. At the time I didn't know a whole lot about the mechanical. Like how the vineyards were actually managed or anything like that. And that's where I started to learn some more about that, and really realized that Texas is, I usually bounce around on the year number, but realistically it's probably like 20 years behind the rest of the West Coast. We all do the same trellising. We all, kind of bang our heads against the wall with the same varieties. People are getting a little bit more dialed in on what grows here really well. But the overhead was insane. You had, 8 to 10 acres per person. And when you're thinking like we are, how can we streamline? How can we get economies of scale? Same as, like when we were looking at multifamily investments, this did not make sense. Now, what I came across that was another light bulb moment for me of like, hey, there's a way to make this work. This is how other people are doing it. Is I made another connection. He's now our vineyard manager. He's our director of vineyard management in Texas Wine Country, Rusty, and he is one of the only guys in Texas that runs mechanized vineyard management. So there's not really there are no other mechanized vineyards in the state of Texas. So typically,
can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different levels of mechanization, right? So you have everything from a traditional, like the same thing you'd read about in the Bible, right? People with dry land, vines out there, and they're hand plucking shoots off of it to thin the leaves, and they're picking all the grapes by hand, and every year they're trimming them by hand to prune them back, so you have to prune them back every year. Everything's by hand, all the way swung over to the other side of precision agriculture, where literally everything is done by machine, by a drone, or remotely, with automated technology, especially like irrigation, shoot thinning. You can do in a tractor. You can do canopy management in a tractor, and that's where we land on scale of mechanization. Most people in Texas are usually all hand labor, with tractors doing like vine row management, so keeping the weeds out, things like that, or they also mechanically harvest, and that's pretty common. You can mechanically harvest with most systems, but what Rusty was doing different is he consistently goes over to California and Oregon and Washington to see what other people are doing, and particularly what the really big guys are doing, right? The ones that are like trying to calculate their vineyard setup to save on tire tractors so they have less turns, those kind of folks, right? And what they were doing is a completely different kind of trellising system, completely different kind of mindset, and that's where we got our model. And the trellising is called high wire, and that's what's behind me right now for anybody watching.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. I think when we're on our first call, I was the trellising process. I think I was comparing to I have a buddy of mine who is he's raising capital on a indoor hemp growing facility. And in order to increase their yield, they're able to grow vertically rather than just along the ground. So I think that process is kind of similar to trellising. Explain that to me.
So I've got some backgrounds here to help out if anybody's watching. So what I'm throwing up behind me now is what's typically done in Texas, and this is called VSP. And so what you can see is my fingers here, but right about here, there's a wire about hip high, knee high, somewhere in there, a few feet high, that the vine grows up to the trunk, and then it has two arms called cordons that come out from there. There are different variations. You can have a bunch of cordons. This is just basic rundown. And then you have all your shoots that come up out of those cordons, and you can see all these all these shoots coming up out of these cordons. And there's a series of pairs of catch wires oriented like this, where the shoots actually go up through the catch wires, and it keeps the whole canopy very upright, well exposed to sunlight, which is good for fruit development. But it's super complex. Like you look at that, there's 11, 15, sometimes 17 wires involved in that. Your fruiting zone is kind of low there. You're farther down towards the ground. So here in Texas, obviously, as you can see in this photo, we get really cold weather. So the closer you are to the ground, the colder the air is, especially when it's during times you would worry about that, like when they're starting to green up and things are real tender. What we do is we greatly simplify everything. And this is nothing new. We're basically taking technology that's been worked on for the last 10 to 15 years in California and applying it here. And it's called high wire. So it's similar to a California sprawl. As you can probably tell, this cordons, the arms are much higher. So they're almost double the height. They're about shoulder to head high, depending on how tall you are. About 60 inches, 64 inches. And it has just one wire. So what that lets you do is you have like a tube of vine, right? So it's super simple. What you can do is there's less parts to get in the way, right? So you can come there and trim or prune the whole row with a machine that straddles the vine row. It has a box of blades. It's called box pruning, and it just buzzes off all of those shoots, and then goes out. It has an optical sensor that senses a trunk or a T-post, and it just comes out, goes back. And so you greatly minimize your hand labor and your overhead. You still got to go back every now and then and clean out, some excessive shoots by hand every now and then. But over the course of 25 years, having to go in there a few times versus having to go in there 1 to 2 times a year all by hand is massive. So,
with regards to your competition in Texas, you said that the industry is 20 years behind the other states that are big wine producers. What's the biggest point of difference between what you guys are doing and the other vineyards in West Texas? What is that biggest point of difference that you're seeing?
So I think there's 2 main points, and this is not true for every vineyard in Texas. There are people that share some common values with us, but in a generalized sense, the 2 things that are different are hyper focused on commercialization. Right? We don't make decisions in the vineyard or about the vineyard based on the heart. It's a huge passion play industry. A lot of people are in it because they love wine. It's cool. It's a sexy asset class, right? You own a vineyard or a winery. It just sounds cool. But if it doesn't make you any money and it sucks, it just drains your wallet. There's not a whole sense in dumping several $1 million into it. So we're hyper focused on commerciality, and then we're so super focused on the science aspect of it. We're not going to do anything just based on a whim. We want to understand as much as we can the data behind that's driving those management decisions in the vineyard, and that's why we pull in highly skilled consultants from California. Obviously, we have to tweak things for Texas, but it's very similar climate to say Fresno, for example. The only difference is our precipitation timing is flip flopped. We get our rain in the summer, they get it in the winter, and our winter time is much colder lows than they get. So we have to compensate for that a little bit by not cropping as much during the initial years, get nice beefy vines that can bounce back from hard freezes in the winter.
From what you've learned over your investment career and then your environmental sciences, your environmental consulting career, what sort of skill sets have you been able to transfer over to not only the wine industry, but I mean, you're also syndicating capital from other investors to give you the resources to execute your business plan. But what are those skill sets that you brought over from your former lives?
Yeah, and just to point out too, that's not even a former life. I still do environmental consulting. I love it, and I'm going to do it as long as I possibly can because it's fun. And we'll get to why it's fun a little bit later, I think. But I think the main skill set that I bring from there is my biggest point of work over in industry is project management. So I'm able to balance all of the needs of these different projects and make sure they keep moving along. I think one of the biggest hurdles for people that are getting into any kind of new niche, whether it's real estate, a small business, any kind of new venture, is that you drop the ball. And it's not like you don't have the skills or you don't have the ability. It's just that you don't consistently do it, right? You have to actually execute. And I feel like that's what I'm best at, is just making sure that we consistently execute. We get the right people talking to the right people and get them doing the right tasks at the right time.
So fill us in where you stand now. When we last spoke a few months ago, I think you were about to go to the market and start raising capital. Where do you guys stand now in this venture?
Yeah, so where we're at now is we're looking at a 2022 plant. So we're going to start raising capital here in the next couple months to do that. What that'll involve is basically starting from scratch. We'll have to raise capital for identifying a property. That'll take time. We'll have to raise capital for purchasing vines. That takes time because the vines, they grow the rootstock, they grow the top graft, which is the part that fruits, and they graft them together, grow them for a while, put them in dormant cold storage, and that's how they ship out. So it takes a while. So you have to order, say like, this year just to get something in late spring of 2022. So a long burn time. But yeah, there's a lot of deals out there right now trying to raise capital too. So we kind of shifted focus a little bit during these initial months. We've been working really hard on refinancing the vineyard and financing and starting our construction for our new custom crush winery facility in Brownfield, which would be like the easiest analogy is like a cotton gin for grapes. It processes. You can get custom winemaking services for other wineries to produce their wine facility. But that's mostly what we've been focusing on right now.
That's great. Listen, we're going to conclude this episode with the hard-hitting questions. These are the questions that we ask every one of our guests. The first thing I always ask is, what is your why?
That's a fantastic question, and it's one of my favorites from your podcast. I have two whys. One is professional, and one is overarching. The overarching one is definitely my family, my wife and my kids. That's a strong driver. It makes you make very responsible decisions, or it should make you make very responsible decisions, thinking about them and how that would affect them. And then my professional why is problem solving. I can get bored with a project if there are no problems to solve. So I'm always looking for something new, like, hey, I need a new challenge to go out there and figure this out. And it's good for process improvement, which is something I enjoy doing. And my wife's an industrial engineer, so she's probably 10 times better at it than me, which is fun to watch me struggle.
We need a lot more people out there that love taking on more problems, like Mason Moreland, I guess, right?
Yeah, that would be good. Maybe in government too. That would be great.
Next question is, what is, off the top of your head, what is the one book or another piece of media that's provided significant value to your life, whether it be professional, personal, or both?
It's an old one and a goodie, but How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think the title, honestly, is terrible. But the whole concept of, hey, just go out there and be a good person and actually listen to people. That's basically the whole book. And that mindset, all those kind of mindset books can really, really change how effective you are. And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I always try to put those kind of things out in front of people, like, just take it, see what you think, digest it if you want, but you'll be better for it. And that's one of them. That's usually the first one.
Knowing what you know now, go back to your 21, 22 recent college graduate self. What's the best piece of information you can give him, knowing what you know now? Oh gosh, my favorite answer to this so far on your podcast has been quit drinking. I think that was on the recent the one you published the other day. That was great. That would be a good one. I do still drink, and I am in the wine industry, so it's hard not to. But I would probably tell him to get your mind straight on family first. I don't think that I was family first centric probably until after my first daughter was born. And honestly, that's helped amplify my business career too, because I have my own priorities straight. So I don't, the decision-making process is easy, right? I kind of almost already have the decision in mind for any kind of, do I go this way or this way on a choice? I would definitely get that straight first. Mason, how can our listeners learn a little bit more about you and Texas Vine Country and everything else about you?
Yeah, I think the best place is definitely LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn. I try to stay on there a lot between Texas Vine Country, TVC's brands, my day job, all of that stuff. That's definitely the best place to reach me. And all of our websites are on there on my LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Hey, listen, Mason, we really appreciate the time. It was great to catch up with you, and thanks for adding your value today. Greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Nick. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a rating and a review, which will help us introduce the podcast to other listeners. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will give you access to other episodes you may have missed. Lastly, if you'd like to learn more about investing alongside us, then head on over to valueaddedpodcast.com. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.